Hello. How's everybody feeling?
Wonderful.
I hope so. Great. AC is working, so that's a good thing. So we can start our tour. I stopped at the facts. Okay, Berlin founded 1280 years, like officially founded, roughly 1300 years ago. There were settlements before that. Originally, even not so much Germanic tribes, but rather Slavic tribes that settled and resided here, and that's the reason why many of the names of rivers, of small communities in the neighborhood of Berlin, Federal Frankfurt, have Slavic sounding names. Even the name of Berlin most probably comes from an old Slavic word for swamp. It's not, although it sounds a bit like that, connected to the bear, Berlin, but has a much more, a very different meaning originally. Although the coat of arms of the city of Berlin is the Berlin Bear, you will see colored and painted polar bears standing everywhere in the city, as it is the symbol of the city, and also sounds a bit like it. Population at the current time around 3.65 million. There's a tendency, like every year now, we have growing population, about 30 to 50,000 new inhabitants get registered in the city every year, not so much due to people fleeing to refugees, that too, but mainly Berlin has become a quite popular place for people that are to study or to spend and waste the time in, but also to work, to do research, to work in government, for instance, for international corporations, so on and so forth. When we look around here, we see several parts of Berlin's history represented. We look in front of us, and on the left-hand side, we see an architect, like a building that was here already before the war. Was a little damaged, but was repaired, refurbished, and fully refurbished after reunification. But on the right-hand side and in front of us, most of the buildings date to the early 1990s, at a time when this area, which is pretty much the new city center of the town, was redeveloped, and also the character of the grid, of the street, of the ground plan of the city was redeveloped and redone. In front of us, the Hackische Höfe, it's the area or the place we're going on Thursday, because it is there where the variety show, the cabaret show, is being shown. A connection of various inner courtyards for residents, residential parts, but also some offices, theaters, movie theaters, and of course more shops. I found their place there. It's quite an interesting area to go at night. So you have bars in the area, many of them different ones. You have also small shops with a large variety of items on stock and display and on offer. And you also have small restaurants and cafes where you can get a drink, get something to eat. If you look to the right, you will see buildings mainly with 2 to 4 stories, indicating that's an older part of the extension, like of the city's development, mainly in the later 18th century and early 19th century. The typical late Prussian Berlin architecture or the residential house would have 5 to 6 stories. So whenever you see buildings of this height, you understand you're in an area that was developed well before the foundation of the German Empire. We're also in an area that until the rise, until the Nazis came to power, was home to the Jewish community. Not only here, but in parts. They had some of the institutions here, they had cemeteries, they had schools, they had a synagogue that we're going to pass by very soon. By the way, the synagogue where the first female rabbi in the world was ordinated. that sadly afterwards fell victim to the Nazi oppression and was killed in Theresienstadt concentration camp. Which also shows you a good deal of Berlin history and the legacy of Berlin. On one side, it stands for the emancipation of minorities in the 19th century and early 20th century, and again post-war. But in between were also this scene of terror and oppression and persecution. The synagogue I spoke about is on the right-hand side with a gilded dome on top. It's the so-called new synagogue because it was built in the 19th century for the growing Jewish community and especially for the liberal and reform part of it, and that's why it's the new synagogue. The older synagogues are located close by. It was a highly contested building at that time because it introduced combined seatings for men and women, which was unheard of in the 19th century in Jewish synagogues, and also had an organ for the liturgy, which was also forbidden or is forbidden in Orthodox Jewry. So that was the reason why the Jewish community split up into a Reform section and the Orthodox community or congregation, which found its new seminary here right down the street. And it's still very important for instance, American rabbis to come to Berlin and to study the lives of these two main and very influential denominations of Jewry, because they had major influence, saw major influence here in Berlin in the 19th century, early 20th century. On this street on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side it's easier to understand because there's the remnants of a famous squat of the early 1990s, the Tacheles Cultural Center. A former, it was originally built as a department store, even before between the world wars. Was damaged during the war and stood there half empty over a good deal of the GDR, because we are in East Berlin, in former GDR territory. Was later used for, I don't know even what for, but then in 1989, after the fall of the wall and until reunification, these 11 months were quite crucial for the, I would say, for the foundation of the myth about Berlin being such a rebel city, because formally or legally the two countries coexisted, and Berlin as a city was still divided legally, but the frontier was gone, and there were quite a few objects in the East Berlin city center that stood empty, and where squatters just went in and started to develop their own projects. And the Tacheles Cultural Center on the left-hand side, this abandoned building, was one of them. And usually around these larger complexes, a whole art scene, nightlife scene emerged and developed, and this particular area here in the early 90s was one of the hotspots for the nightlife in Berlin. Over the years it remained so until let's say 15 years at least, or 10 years ago, when of course investment became more and more interesting for both national and international investors, and that led to, on the one side, the investments into the structures. So houses were refurbished, new houses were built, the streets were repaired, the whole city was repaired in this area. But at the same time, the art scene either went away or just changed, and also the people who come to this area have changed in the meantime. It's not as touristy anymore as it used to be. It was one of the top tourist destinations in the whole city until 15 years ago, and now it's a little forgotten, it's a little calm. Yeah, it's probably the other side of this development. Residential, like housing has become quite pricey in this area, whereas it was very cheap 20 years ago. So these are the usual developments you see in many European countries when older parts of the cities first become interesting for younger people, for the alternative independent scene, and later on attract investment and change their character. either bought a flat here or wanted to buy, and rented it here at a time when they were still together. But that's also true. Berlin as a city and the whole region has become very popular for Hollywood productions. So it's not only productions that are that tell a Berlin or a German story like Bridge of Spies or Valkyrie, but also movies that like The Bourne Identity that take place in the movie at least in Moscow, but to a large deal were shot here in the streets of Berlin, because there are parts of Berlin and some of them we're going to see hopefully resemble at least a certain understanding of Moscow. It is quite easy, and the city supports movies to be shot here in the city, and the infrastructure is there. You have specialists who can help the directors and so on and so forth. So you will see Hollywood productions or parts of them being shot in the city, and that's why quite a few actors and actresses either have already purchased property in the city or outside of the city, or are flicking west to the city when they do the shooting, or in case of artists like Madonna. Madonna usually resides in Berlin during her European tours, or resided when she still the tours. Yeah, she stays at the Soho House in Torstrasse. In front of us you see also again different points of Berlin's history. On the left hand side you still a non-refurbished old house of the late 19th century, early 20th century. On the other corner it's an even older house that looks east, which has been refurbished and is very luxurious. And further down the road you will see on either sides, on both sides, new buildings and old buildings side to side. And we will approach the former border area quite soon, and there I would point out the difference, or this one of the areas in Berlin where the gap and the voids that are left from or were left from the time of the separation are closed again by new buildings, by new developments, where people start to live again, where there are new institutions. We will pass by the new headquarters of our secret service, like the International Secret Intelligence Service, and you will see it's quite large. And it also chose, because they needed a fairly large ground, they chose this area because there was land available. And then after about 15 minutes we should be at the memorial. We don't like to spend so much time at the memorial, to show you some things, so you can maybe come back on Friday or some other day in the evening. It's fairly easy to reach from the hotel, but at least give you an impression of how the Berlin Wall looked in many areas and many parts of Berlin, and it's a fairly good opportunity, a fairly good place to do. With bike lanes in many parts of the city, so whenever you cross the street, please not only have a look at the cars but at the bikes. So they most probably won't stop for you, and that's really painful. And just recently there was another top group, but a group invited by the Goethe Institute, a lady that was hit and she was brought to the hospital, and I don't know what happened to the bicyclist, but she was injured anyway. Sadly, we won't see the headquarters of the intelligence service, but it's not a nice building anymore. It's not a big loss. So we're crossing already from the eastern side the wall, from the border. front of us on the right hand side you already see the Berlin Wall. We will just go there, turn to the right, stop the bus, get off and spend some moments on the memorial, and then we'll continue our journey. There was a question about how West Berlin as a city could survive being completely surrounded by the wall and being an island on communist territory. First of all, I think I forgot to mention that, or maybe I didn't underline it fully, that West Berlin had a specific status, special legal status. It was not legally fully a part of West Germany. Was de facto a part of West Germany in the Western world, but it had special laws, and the people in Berlin had to vote separately for laws that concerned also other parts of the country. And men were not subject to mandatory military service, or they were freed of it because the Potsdam Agreement forbid West German military on Berlin ground. So it's also a reason why many independent-minded people from other parts of West Germany moved to West Berlin in order to avoid military service. And starting from the time after the erection of the Berlin Wall, the West Berliners got some extra money for the same job. They got kind of like a subsidy that was meant to keep the people in the city and not leave to other parts of West Germany, which many companies did, and also to attract new workers because there was still construction going on. It was not only about culture and research and education. So the question why and how West Berlin was able to survive had many aspects and many features. One of them was, of course, there were transit highways. There was connection to other parts of West Germany in the Western world. So certain goods could be transported on trucks on these special highways. There were 3 of them, and there were also 3 transit railway connections, railway lines. One of them we took partly today. There was one for the northern parts, more for the central parts, more for the southern parts. So the direct train from Munich to Berlin over many years, even after reunification, followed the transit railways of the time of the division. On top of that, the highways, there are the highway number 2, highway number 9, number 4, and several other streets followed these historical transit routes. That was one opportunity. The other possibility was flying goods and people into West Berlin. That, however, was restricted to non-German carriers because no West German airline was allowed to fly into West Berlin until reunification, so it had to be done by either a subsidiary or an American or British or French company airline offering their services to bring the goods or to transport and ship the goods to West Berlin. There was also, and when we speak of a city, and Berlin used to be one of the largest cities of the world in the interwar period, it had a population of over 4 million many other things were cut into the house. Sewage system, the underground system. The underground system was not, well, the underground system was not cut into two halves, but it was separated. It became separated one for the Easterners and the Westerners. Then television lines were cut, other electricity cables were cut, and so on and so forth. This meant like a very demanding situation and challenge in order to administer and manage the city and to maintain it. New power plants had to be built. There were new gas tanks and natural gas and oil tanks to be built to make West Berlin more or less independent of Soviet supply. And these things had to be brought in and shipped in by cargo vessels, by ships. Luckily there had been already many canals dating back to the 19th century and early 20th century, so there was, the infrastructural means were there, it could be used, but it was of course with all the border stations and the controls and the tolls and so on and so forth. It was quite a challenge, but it was doable. Organizing and running a city not only means bringing in resources, but also getting rid of and dispose of everything that is waste. So new landfills were opened up, there were special incinerators built for trash, but that was not sufficient, so trash had to be brought out of West Berlin either by trucks to landfills in the east, which was a source of income for the East German government, or were put on even boats and shipped to West Germany, which is quite insane because it's quite far. But things like that were necessary, and in a way they worked. I mean, it was difficult for everybody, but it was possible and was done and was maintained until the fall of the Berlin Wall. In the Berlin Wall also was a little bit difficult for the East Berliners, because closing off West Berlin not only meant that the West Berliners had to take care of their resources, where to get them from, but also meant that the people of the northeastern parts of Berlin had to find completely new ways to go to Potsdam, for example, because Potsdam is in the southwest of Berlin. So prior to the Berlin Wall, they would just board a train and more or less go through like a direct connection. But with West Berlin becoming an island, they had to go around it. So the East German government had to build a circle railway line around West Berlin, which is good today, because today we have many train connections that do not cross Berlin, making it very easy for the commuters to avoid Berlin if they don't have to. But that is also something that would make it very difficult. West Berliners could visit, not immediately, but starting from the 60s, not all the time, but more to the end of the GDR, in 1980s more frequently. You could go to the east. They had for every day, they had to exchange West German marks into East German marks, a certain amount per day, 25 marks per day, and they had to spend it in the east. There was also kind of like a subsidy for the East German economy. The other way around, it wasn't as nearly as easily, but it was not so different from what Mrs. Clapper, the eyewitness in Kaiser, has told us. So it was theoretically it was possible, but you had to apply for permission, and you couldn't be sure to be granted that. So yeah. Journey on this particular road, which gives you an insight into Berlin Reconstruction of the Socialist era. So we'll see many high-rises, prefabricated Plattenbau socialist city planning, that's what they did. Speaking of city planning, urban planning, on the left-hand side, you see a large complex that was done by before the like between the world wars in the 1920s by usually the different occupations had a certain association and representation, and some of them even set up like construction clubs. So they were building companies carrying or building residential houses for civil servants, for instance, and the civil servants could become members of these associations and then could be assigned flats, for instance. One of the developments we see here on the left-hand side. And those of you who know a little bit the history of architecture will understand that it's a rather conservative approach in terms of the stylistic vocabulary, and that's no wonder because it was built for civil servants, which, at least in Germany, tend to be more conservative than the average population. At the corner, you see the Soho House, which is now the exclusive private club where Madonna stays during her European tours, and George Clooney usually stays when he's shooting in Berlin. That's a private club that you have to pay for if you get, accepted. And they have restaurants, they have a hotel in there, they have a spa, obviously, and nightclub possibly. The building is quite interesting as well. It was built by a German Jewish entrepreneur who was among the first who sold furniture on the left-hand side, corner, left-hand side. This one, with a rooftop cafe on the at the corner. There used to be a store for furniture, and the special thing about this store was pretty much like the leasing system today. You could pay 25% or so of the price and then monthly pay the rest. That was fairly new at that particular time, 100 years ago. Since the entrepreneur and the owner was Jewish, his business was taken away from him by the Nazis. He was expelled from the country, and I have to say I'm not sure about his fate. I think he immigrated somewhere. The Nazis went in with the youth organization, the Hitler Youth. Stayed there until 1945. War ended. This became East Berlin, and for a short period of time it was the collective seat of the Communist Party. But later on, mainly was the seat of the one of the mass youth organizations of East Germany. So I understand the first one was Jewish, then became Nazi, and then became the mass organization of the Socialists. Then it stood empty, as many other buildings after reunification, and now it's an exclusive, privately run spa hotel. So yeah, these are the almost kind of like a very typical development for especially East Berlin buildings. In front of us you see an area that also looked like the area of the Berlin Wall prior to the Berlin Wall, so very densely populated, old structures, a city like the street grid of the 19th century. And we will follow the street for a couple of moments, and you understand how drastically it has changed. It has completely been altered by this East German government, because they had a difficult task. Once they had decided to make East Berlin the capital, the very center of East Berlin was close to the Berlin Wall. So you had the difficult situation for a regime that the capital's main point was not in the center of the city, but at the edge. So they tried to extend the ideological core, if you will, of the capital by also rebuilding and reshaping the surrounding neighborhoods. And in front of us is one of the key areas of that time, of the 1960s mainly, and at earlier stage, 1950s, we'll see later on after a U-turn, and we'll head back on the former Stalin Boulevard. So on the right-hand side, you see in parts buildings of the Socialist era that are that are either refurbished and serve another purpose now, or were replaced, if you don't see them anymore, by new buildings in the 1990s. So you have the corner, you see a refurbished GDR building, which was quite elegant in a new interpretation of Bauhaus, I would say. Next to it is an older part, and more in the direction of the television tower you see in new buildings of the 1990s. Here on the right hand side, quite typical residential buildings, houses of the GDR time, refurbished now. They were quite popular by the locals back then because the living standard was much higher than in the old buildings that often didn't have running water or toilets or whatever. Still very dry, very wet and moist. So the new buildings had all the amenities of modern life. They had elevators, they had, of course, they had fully equipped bathrooms, they had kitchens and so on and so forth. And they were available for everybody. Applied for it. But still, nowadays, you feel like in a socialist city with wide roads. You had streetcars on the divider between the roads. The only difference now is you have bike lanes. They didn't have bike lanes in a socialist city. In front of us here now is what was a very important square for the GDR. It was back then the Lenin Square. It is now the square of the United Nations. And if you imagine on the left hand side where you now see the trees, there was one of the main, or was it here? I don't remember anymore. One of these spots here, on one of these corners was a gigantic Lenin statue. And those of you who have seen Goodbye Lenin, the movie, they know at least the head of this statue because it was brought here by a helicopter, in a movie at least, flying through the street that we're going to see very soon. To a square, and we will make a turn to the right, but when we do that, please now look to the left and have a view into the east, straight to Moscow, on one of the main redevelopment plans and projects of the whole GDR, I would say. It's the boulevard that they decided upon in the year started to build in the year 1950. At a time when Stalin was still alive in Berlin, the GDR government was pretty much Stalinist. It remained so until the 80s, I would say, but even then, especially then, it was very Stalinist, so they wanted something to honor the great leader of the communist world, Joseph Stalin, so they wanted to replace the old neighborhoods with this Boulevard of Triumph. It was also one of the main roads that the Red Army had taken in order to move into Berlin, coming from the east, from Poland, from Warsaw, Poznan and so on, and were on their way to the city center towards the Reichstag building where we're going today in the evening, and also a boulevard that would show the power and the self-esteem of the new socialist country, the GDR. So they extended the road massively, made one of the widest boulevards in all of Europe, chose an architecture that was modeled on the boulevards in Moscow, and called it initially the Stalin Boulevard after Stalin's death and a de-Stalinization in the Eastern Bloc. It was renamed Karl Marx Boulevard, a name that it has still today. The architecture, a neoclassicist Stalinist interpretation of neoclassicism, very solid constructions, ornaments on top, quite nice apartments, and built for and meant for also dedicated to workers and peasants, and also, of course, members of the intelligentsia and the nomenclatura of the regime. Quite different, we see, as a part of this development, a later one, here on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Please have a look on top of at the advertisements. Wotokov Tatra and Balkan Karponem from Czech Republic, Bulgaria, historic signs and advertisements dating back to the time when it was still a socialist bloc. On the left-hand side, restaurant Moscow with a small Sputnik at the corner, and the movie theater International also integrated into the whole development scheme. And it was here, for instance, in this restaurant Moscow, that the hitman who was supposed to kill Born identity celebrated what he thought was his victory, and he gets the news here that he didn't succeed when Born was still alive. And the camera makes a move and depicts also the Mokotov advertisement on top of the house, and then the Berlin viewer at least understood, okay, the scene was shot in Berlin and not in Moscow, as it said, because they just failed to erase that particular part of the city and make these small slips. There are so many on. If you want to check YouTube for that, you find many different examples. What is interesting for you, if you look at the left-hand side now, socialist reconstruction meant also you had to redevelop the fundamental and the very crucial professions and occupations of a new state, and one of them being teachers. So, near to the heart of the capital of East Berlin, East Germany, they built houses for teachers. A house for the teacher, a house for tourism, a house for statistics, and so on and so forth. On the left-hand side, the nicest one, I would say, with the most precious mosaic going around it, is the house of teachers, of the teacher, which, what is always interesting, I think, for especially American guests, has one specialty. If you look at the mural, the fresco you see now, between the boy and the girl looking at the globe, there's a small black rectangular kind of thing. And that covers a hole through which the Stasi, the state security, would observe the mass demonstrations, and also everybody who attended the May Day demonstrations that took place every year.
See it?
Yeah. Alexanderplatz, I think you will explore on your own a couple of times, starting from today. Also Alexa shopping mall, if you're interested, with a Media Markt and Edeka and so on and so forth, offering their goods, their items. And Alexanderplatz itself, it's the most visited square in the city. It's a main traffic intersection. There's 3 underground lines meeting, several urban rail lines meeting, buses, tramways, regional trains, and so on and so forth. So you will get that on your own, I'm sure, and feel free to ask any question once they pop up. In front of us, have a look. The name of Alexanderplatz was chosen in honor of the visit of the Russian Tsar Alexander I in the early 19th century to the city. We now come into the cradle of Berlin. We saw it already on the map, like where the circular, like the inner circle of the circular part of the inner city. That is directly on the right-hand side, where you see the church with the 2 towers that were redone. The area itself was heavily damaged in the war and was, by the GDR, in a very unique way, rebuilt. Not fully authentically, but in their own understanding and interpretation for the 850th anniversary of the city. And I think that today I told you that Berlin was 1280 years old. That's not true. It was 1280 that it was founded, so it's 780 years old. Sorry, just remember that. So for the 750th anniversary in 1987, the East German government decided to redevelop the area where Berlin once originated from. You see on the right hand side, so they used a mixture of old and new construction methods, prefabricated panels for the facade, but also behind the facades you have modern buildings often. Not these ones, these are fully kind of refurbished, parts reconstructed, but there are others. We have like a facade that is supposed to resemble its historic appearance, but it's basically only the facade of the building behind it. On the right hand side, down the river, you see a large cathedral, which was the main cathedral for the Hohenzollern, for the Prussian kings and the German emperors. And next to it was a building that we're going to see later on, because we will use the main boulevard on our way back from the Reichstag, from the Parliament building, and we'll see the very heart of historical Berlin. Also the part that Jenny was probably to show you during the midnight walking tour. Right? We use now one of the three main east-west connections of the city, the Leipzig Street. Headed westwards on both sides until like before we reach the former border, West Berlin again. You will see some newer high-rises here, like here, the one on the left-hand side, the glass one, and older ones like the one behind the other hotel one. Quite prestigious developments of the later stage of the G area on the left-hand side, made for diplomats but also for other people. Buildings that served at least two purposes. One is housing, of course, representation, and the second one was there is a publishing house, a West German publishing house, and its headquarters located close by. And this West German publishing house had a very anti-communist agenda. So what they did was to put on their high-rise building, the headquarters, a screen that faced the east, and that screen showed slogans, commentaries, but also news that, at least in the West, were thought to be non-existent in the East. So they wanted to spread information in the East, and shocked by that, the East Berlin government decided to build these large residential houses in order to block the view, because they stand directly in the way between East Berlin city center and the publishing house and high-rise. We now cross a street that to the left leads to Checkpoint Charlie, that you're going to visit on the walking tour. If you look to the left now, down the road, you see Checkpoint Charlie. A soldier looking at us, and on the right-hand side, we would have seen Friedrichstraße. In front of us, an interesting area as well. The large buildings forming the entry into the Potsdam Square area. It's just very hot, like sitting in the front row. It's marking the entry into the Potsdam Square area. The square, the most visited square, most important square of Berlin before the Second World War, which was the symbol for the roaring 20s, where you had a lot of traffic, many theaters, restaurants, businesses, but also residential areas. An area that stood on the so-called border triangle, where the British, the American, and the Soviet sectors met, and as such being on the demarcation line between East and West, meaning that the Berlin Wall was specifically strengthened and fortified there. So every building that still stood there before the Berlin Wall had been put up was removed, leaving the whole area pretty much a desert. I showed you at the beginning an image of the area with the Philharmonic Orchestra. When we further continue on that road, we will pass by the Philharmonic Orchestra, and if you remember, and I can show it again later. Originally, until the war, it was very densely populated. It was a fully integrated city, and then it was pretty much an open field with a Philharmonic Orchestra and another building time the largest construction site after the one in Singapore, in Shanghai, sorry. And was meant to become the new center of the city, but that didn't fully materialize. On the left-hand side, we see one of the remnants here of Nazi architecture in Berlin. It was originally built for Göring and the Air Force. Later on, it was impossible to destroy, several bombs fell in the vicinity, but it wasn't destroyed, couldn't be destroyed afterwards. So they kept it. The East German government went in for a couple of years, and now it's the Ministry of Finance. The next one here on the left-hand side with the flags was the second legislative body of our parliament, or of Germany. It's the Bundesrat, the Federal Council, the representation of the governments of the federal states. And here we are in the heart of the Reconstruction, crossing the Berlin Wall yet once again, and a couple of times afterwards. So behind the towers we will be definitely in West Berlin again. And it's also an interesting place to go to, especially when it's dark, I would say, because the Sony Center, which is behind the glass tower on the right hand side here in front of us, is quite nicely illuminated. You can have a drink there, a cafe, you can eat, and there's also a movie theater showing all movies in English. The traffic lights, like the famous dispute over the traffic lights, whether or not this was the first traffic light or not in the country. The Berliners say yes, the Hamburgers say no. People of Hamburg, the city of Hamburg say no. On the left hand side you see that green thing showing the time, 20 to 4. At the beginning it was, there was a police officer standing on top of it and handling the traffic, because there were so many, there was so much of it. It was the early version of a traffic light. There were no colors, but there was an officer, giving way to, the respective people who took part in traffic. It was replaced and taken away. Now it's a replica, as a monument to it. In the center, also in the divider, you see some of these poles. You get some information on German television and movies, films, because it is here where the main movie theaters for the International Film Festival of Berlin are being screened. In front of us, Philharmonic Orchestra, the yellowish building, originally meant for another part of Berlin, where they wanted to build a huge highway in an old neighborhood something that they eventually, luckily didn't do. So they needed another location for the Philharmonic Orchestra as well, and so they thought, why not putting it here? Because when the wall had been put up, all the major museums were inaccessible in East Berlin. So the West Berliners had collections. They had they had collections with branches of the other museums on their territory, and they wanted to show them. So they thought, why not developing a whole cultural cluster here close to the border? Because close to the border, nobody wanted to buy property anyway. So why not putting our cultural center there? And also there was this prospect of eventually having reunification, and this being one integral part of a reunited Berlin, forming kind of like the cultural heritage directly in the center of the city. So that was kind of like the idea born out of the decision that the highway in the west finally was built. Philharmonic Orchestra Berlin, not only but fundamentally has become a brand, an international brand under Karajan, the main conductor, and today, of course, more famous than Claudia Abbado is Sir Simon Rattle, who has just left Berlin for Philadelphia, or where's he now? I think he went to, I'm not sure, maybe London or an American orchestra, I'm not entirely sure. So a quite famous orchestra. It's very difficult to get tickets for shows with the main leading conductor, because high demand. Many lovers of classical music especially come to Berlin to go to the Philharmonic Orchestra, because it's also one of the iconic concert halls in the world. Now probably only matched in Hamburg by the new Philharmonic Orchestra in Hamburg. And when speaking about Germany, there are others in the world too, of course. Next to it, and if you are specifically interested in painting from the 1700s to the turn of the 19th and 20th century, there's a museum next to it on Culture Forum, the Gemäldegalerie, and they have a large collection of Flemish, Belgian, Dutch, and then Impressionist painting. It's really a very significant collection, and it's really worth going there. So this is one of the museums I could recommend if you're interested. Hier ist links. We now make a turn. We now make a turn to the left, and we will see what we won't see much, but we will pass by a former building on the street is called Tiergartenstraße. Tiergarten, like the landscape garden in front of us. And there was a house on number 4, and in number 4 the decision was taken to start the euthanasia program under the Nazis. T4, the T4 action, meaning a concentration of people with disability and their murder. Some of them were killed by injections, other ones were gassed and cremated, not in Berlin but in other, like in former hospital complexes or other palace, formerly used as palaces. At that time, there was still protest by the churches, for example, and due to a certain extent, at least, due to the protest by the churches and civilians, this T4 action was finished, was abandoned eventually. But it was like a test drive for the organized mass destruction that would follow afterwards, targeting mainly Jews and Roma and Sinti people. There's a small memorial now on the left-hand side, because in the whole area here you will see, maybe already today, some of you right now, today we won't have time, but during the walking to the Holocaust Memorial, next to it there will be other memorials for the persecuted homosexuals, and also the latest memorial dedicated to the murdered Sinti and Roma people of Europe. So this is a whole kind of memorial complex here.
So the interesting thing about the T4 memorial is that when it was designed, they wanted to make it accessible. And so it's accessible for wheelchairs, there's braille, so anybody with disabilities can go. Here it is right here with the blue ball right here. And see how the information is very low so that people with wheelchairs can come by. And so they wanted to make sure they designed it in a way that was accessible.
plan by Adolf Hitler and Albert Speer to completely rebuild Berlin as the new Nazi capital, and based on this plan, this area here was supposed to become the kind of a diplomatic quarter. From that time, only two embassies date back to this time, and it was not surprisingly the Japanese and the Italian embassy. Embassies in a very also a neoclassicist kind of architecture. This one's a school, kind of like a normal in a boarding school. All the other embassies that came to Berlin only after reunification again. For instance, the Saudi Arabian embassy. The next one is the academy, like a training and educational center for one of the political foundations. In this case, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which is conservative. The foundation affiliated to the Conservative Party. On the left-hand side here are the embassies of the Nordic countries. So mainly Scandinavian countries. And on the right-hand side, it's mainly residential areas also, like mainly built in the 1980s. We will now head towards West Berlin city center, which is the Berlin Zoo area and the area around the Emperor Friedrich Wilhelm Memorial Church that we're going to see. Before that, on the right hand side, a very important hotel for American presidents, because it's the Interconti on the right hand side. It's usually used by the American presidents during their state visits because they allow a very high level of security there. right-hand side we have one of the two. No, let's just make first the right turn to the right, and then on the right-hand side we have one of the entrances to one of the two zoos of Berlin, because that's also a feature of our city that due to the separation, two objects of the same kind of category developed. So we used to have two academies of art, two academies of science, in the beginning two main public universities, there are more now, and two zoos. The Berlin Zoo that we have in the west here is the older one, and it's also slightly different. It's highly, well, it kind of focuses to a large degree on sea animals, water animals. It is a zoo with one of the highest numbers of species represented, but many of them are very small fish. The zoo in East Berlin is more like a landscape garden with animals in, and has also a great variety of animals that came to Berlin as present from former socialist brother countries. In front of us, the Memorial Church, one of the main sites and also symbols of West Berlin. Originally it was really like a normal church, nothing spectacular, but it was destroyed as many others in the war, and was supposed to be completely demolished and removed afterwards. But when the authorities asked the Berlin population what to do with this, they opted to keep it as a memorial, as a monument to the war. So the central part is a preserved ruin with a very small exhibition, and on either side you have the new buildings that serve as the acting church. Quite interesting architecture, especially when it's getting dark and when they have you have a very unique atmosphere in between, or when through the colored glass front into the area where the people are sitting and the altar is located. And it's also the site of the, some of you have heard about it, the terrorist attack when terrorists took a truck and drove into a Christmas market that uses to be here in carnivals. By traffic, but it's very easy to walk on. Can give you directions how to get there. It's also a great shopping area. If you're interested in photography as an art form, the CO Berlin here in the America House, which was an American cultural center in post-war West Berlin, is, to my in my view, the most the most interesting photography gallery in Berlin, here on the left-hand side, CO Berlin. Or if you just want to stroll around, if you want to go to the Kaiser Wilhelm Boulevard Christmas shop, it's also on that street. If you collect, what's that? Hard Rock Cafe marks or whatever. If Hard Rock Cafe is also there. I just mentioned it because it's a frequent question that we ask. And the Monkey Bar is something that's on the rooftop, on the roof of a shopping mall. And there's a bar that, from where you can see the monkeys of Berlin Zoo, and that's really nice atmosphere, I would say. Yeah, it's really great. So, for those of you who are interested in the history of genocide, there's also quite an interesting area, because you all heard about, of course, the Armenian genocide. And maybe some of you have heard about the Operation Nemesis. And it was an operation of Armenian nationalists who got to know that Pasha, what was his name? They're one of the responsible generals of the young Ottoman Republic, resided here and was assassinated here on the street, so close to the square, by Armenian nationalists. In front of us, the you probably understand that it's post-war redevelopment architecture. It's something that you can imagine to see in other European countries as well. At that time, the Ernst-Reuter-Platz, Ernst-Reuter Square, an area that was heavily destroyed in the war and was supposed to be redeveloped, and it was, you know, competition over it, and the competition that was chosen had this design with large street, a large east-west connection, a perspective into East Berlin, and also a good traffic connection with the other parts of the city. The square itself, where you saw the fountain, the water fountain going up, served also like a symbolic reaction to Hitler's and Albert Speer's plan to reconstruct Berlin, because it was directly at the end, in the middle of this whole axis that the Nazis wanted to build, that was supposed to connect not only Berlin, the parts of Berlin, but Berlin with the rest of Western Europe. And like the fountain going up, it symbolizes, okay, we put an end to this kind of idea. So we block the view. If you look back, we block the direct view, or we kind of create a certain obstacle on the street to remind you that this is something new that we are creating. We are going through another city gate here, which makes you understand that up until 1920, when Greater Berlin was officially founded, good parts of the city were independent cities on their own. So we just passed by, or went through, the Charlottenburg Gate, indicating that Charlottenburg used to be an independent city until 1920, and now is one of the districts of West Berlin and one of the largest neighborhoods in Berlin altogether. And in between there was, originally, until the 19th century, there was just federal, there was Brandenburg, there was not Berlin, it was not the city of Berlin. Nowadays, of course, it's one integrated city, and here you get an idea of how large the park is. So you can go from the end of historical East Berlin, which is the Brandenburg Gate, or the Reichstag building, where we're going to be, all the way to Berlin Zoo, which is West Berlin city center, and everything is a park, more or less. So if you have free time, if you want to do a bike tour on some day, and it's a good place to go, actually. It's very safe, it's very nice. But there are also nude parts here and there, so just don't get shocked by that. You know, they're naked people. They are naked people. In front of us, a monument that initially stood in front of the Reichstag, the Parliament building, and was slightly smaller. It's the so-called victory column, commemorating the victories of the Prussian army over the kingdoms of Denmark, Austria, and the French Republic. Wars that had to be won before the First German Empire in 1871 could be formed. And this monument remembers these times. If you have a look at the column, itself, you see gilded ornaments going through the top three segments of the column that we see now, and these were made of original cannons that were used in these wars. They were melted and put in that shape and gilded. Shows ornaments and frescoes going around, which have clearly a very nationalist tone, and also very common kind of correct character. The Nazis brought it here as part of their Reconstruction plan in the late 1930s. Now you can go in, climb up, and have a brilliant view over the city. country. However, he mainly serves symbolic representational purposes. The left-hand side here. But if the heads of states of other countries visit Berlin, it is here where they are having their receptions. You see the coat of arms on top of the main corpus, and that indicates that he's in the building. Federal president at the moment is the former federal minister Klaus-Walter Steinmeier. John Foster Dulles, some of you may have heard of him, former foreign president of the USA. In the 1950s in West Berlin there was an architectural competition in a reconstruction kind of plan carried out, and that involved many a large sector of the city close by. We didn't see it so well from the bus, but it's no big deal. But John Foster Dulles, in the name of the United States, donated a building to this competition, or this conference, architectural conference. A building that we see soon on the left-hand side, initially designed as a Congress Center with a very specific roof design, something that the Berliners called the pregnant oyster, or Jimmy Carter's smile on the left-hand side. Understand is that some refer to it as the Jimmy Carter smile. I'm not so sure about the pregnant oyster because it doesn't look like an oyster to me at all, but that's not the point. So it was in Congress Center for a couple of years, then the roof collapsed, unfortunately, killing people, and then after Reconstruction they eventually declared it the Museum of the House of World Cultures, representing the cultures of non-European countries and regions of the world. Very interesting as a convention center. There's brilliant conferences, very advanced and very interesting. And we are approaching the Parliament building. We are slightly earlier, so that gives us time to explore other parts that we normally do not have the time to show. We'll get off the bus there and continue by foot. Our tour starts at 5, so we have about 35 minutes to walk around together. Please take all your belongings with you because we're taking a public bus home.